Welcome to Gough Square Live. I'm Cameron Crowe
And I'm Sabrina Goodchild.
and this really is Gough Square Live. It's a return to our old format, being recorded live and now going out to you. The observant amongst you might have spotted previously that some of our former episodes were recorded, but no, live with all the risks. That means possible streakers, wardrobe malfunctions, toddlers, or barristers as they're known, bursting in, and even Silk swearing in the background, which, as you know, has actually happened in the past. So with that said, please keep your mics and cameras off for the time being. If we've got time at the end, we may try and answer some questions, and you can put those in the chat as we go along. But if not, you can always send us questions afterwards. So with that said, let's get going. And today, we're here to talk about two substantive changes to consumer protection legislation following the 6th of April, which has brought about a new consumer law enforcement landscape, one where we have a Competition and Markets Authority armed with new and extensive powers relating to consumer protection, a CMA that appears geared up to be far more proactive in protecting consumers and able to do so far more easily. As I say, underlying consumer protection legislation that is enhanced and seeks to address known issues that are causing consumer detriment, and of course the prospect of monetary penalties that may run to millions being imposed unilaterally, more akin to the approach adopted by the criminal courts in some ways. Our talk could talk about the enforcement regime and why the change was necessary. It could talk about the new direct enforcement regime and indeed likely areas of focus for the CMA moving forward. But we're not going to do any of those things. We're going to talk solely about two substantive changes of note relating to consumer protection. And the first is fake reviews and the second is drip pricing. I'm going to talk about fake reviews and Sabrina's going to talk about drip pricing. So, fake reviews. The CMA has estimated that as much as 23 billion of UK consumer spending is potentially influenced by online reviews, with 89% of consumers using them when researching products or services. They may be a review of a product, a trader, or any other matter relevant to a transactional decision. They may conceal the fact that a review has been commissioned, such as an online influencer being paid. They may be misleading overall on a website because negative reviews are removed or positive ones are given greater prominence. The Department of Business and Trade research concluded that some 11 to 15% of all reviews for 3 specific product categories alone were fake. Well, that's an enormous amount if you think about it. And they estimated an annual harm of 50 to 312 million for products alone. I mean, it's quite a large range, that 50 to 312, and 312 seems quite specific, but there we are. On any view, fake reviews are a problem. Yet there was previously no express or specific provision to tackle the problem, but there is now. They are expressly prohibited under the DMCC. The new ban practice seeks to cover every fake review eventuality. It covers not just reviews that are fake, but also those that are incentivized without it being made clear that they are incentivized. Helpfully, the CMA has provided guidance on unfair commercial practices that specifically addresses fake reviews in Annex B of that guidance. The new ban practice is contained at paragraph 13 of Schedule 20 of the DMCCA, and it can in essence be broken down into 4 distinct commercial practices, and I'll take those in turn. 4 distinct commercial practices. The first, submitting or commissioning fake reviews and concealed incentivized reviews. So this includes providing a fake review to a trader to publish, as well as the reviewer publishing it themselves. The guidance names professional reviewers, journalists, content creators, so influencers and celebrities by way of example, marketing companies and individuals acting on behalf of traders at risk under this distinct commercial practice. The second is publishing consumer reviews or consumer review information in a misleading way. Here, the guidance says intermediaries are particularly at risk, so platforms, including search engines, online marketplaces, and social media, specialist review sites, and we can all think of a few of those, trader recommendation platforms, retailers, and booking agents, all at risk under that second commercial practice. The third is offering services to procure banned reviews and information for traders. So that's aimed at addressing and disrupting brokers who procure fake reviews on behalf of others. And the fourth is offering services to traders for the facilitating of the procurement of banned reviews and information. So, for example, offering services to traders that enable accounts to be set up in a way that avoids or reduces the risk of detection. So we're not only looking at commissioning or writing fake reviews, which is obviously misleading and is now expressly banned, but also hosting them or publishing them and offering to provide them or find someone who can. It seeks to ban the entire industry around fake and misleading reviews, with the definitions included for the purposes of interpretation being deliberately very broad. This has been an area of CMA enforcement activity for a few years now, as many of you will know. And as many of you will know, Google signed undertakings a couple of weeks ago, well, a month or so ago now, that require it to enhance its processes to tackle fake reviews and enforce sanctions for those that are found to be doing it. And there is a case against Amazon that remains open. But what we also have for the first time in the DMCCA is the express positive obligation to take reasonable and proportionate steps to prevent fake reviews from being published and to remove them if published. Failure to take those steps amounts to an infringement of the banned practice. So publishers in this context includes traders placing reviews on their own media, for example, retailers, but also intermediaries. All publishers will need to have a clear policy on the prevention and removal of banned reviews and will need to assess the risks of such material appearing on their media so they can take proactive, reasonable and proportionate steps to prevent and remove such reviews. Interestingly, the guidance states that if a banned review appears, that may indicate the publisher has not done enough. So once again, if you get one, if one appears, the guidance suggests that's evidence in and of itself that you haven't done enough. It goes so far as to say, if you cannot put effective measures in place, then simply don't publish reviews. So you can see from all that I've just said, it's quite clear what the CMA's approach to this is and government's approach. The whole industry of fake reviews needs to go, and it needs to go sooner rather than later. It also makes clear in the guidance, rightly, that the use of fake reviews, as well as infringing the banned practice, is also potentially breaching other legislation or regulations. So the Fraud Act 2006, and I know that some of you on today from Trading Standards will have used fake review evidence as part of a network or framework of evidence when seeking to prove fraud offences. It also references the Advertising Standards Authority's codes. But the scope for, in short, and the ease of bringing actions against those seeking, using, and even offering fake reviews has now greatly increased. Put simply, this industry has to go. Some important information in relation to it, though, is that the new rules relating to fake reviews will not be enforced until the 6th of July of this year. That's following feedback about the implementation of systems to tackle the new duties under the legislation. So not until the 6th of July of this year. So that's a whistle-stop tour of fake reviews. And that leads me now to turn to Sabrina, who's going to talk to you about drip pricing.
Thanks, Cameron. With the media furore over the Oasis tickets and secondary ticketing issues trundling along, pricing has again become a hot topic. As Cameron said, I'm going to focus on drip pricing this morning, which of course is where consumers are shown an initial price for a product, but then additional fees are introduced, so dripped, as consumers proceed with the purchase. And it's a surprisingly big issue. So research that was commissioned by the government back in 2023 found that 46% of 525 online or app providers that were sampled included at least one dripped price, and that's excluding delivery fees as part of their checkout process. There was significant variation by sector. So it was most recently found in the transport and communication sector and least frequently found in the retail sector, but still a significant proportion. They also found that dripped fees, again, other than delivery fees, were estimated to cause UK consumers to spend an additional 595 million to 3.5 billion. So again, a very large range and a precise range online each year. So this morning I thought we'd look at what the restrictions are, which of course came into force on the 6th of April on drip pricing, when we can expect enforcement action on drip pricing, and then the key uncertainties with the drip pricing prohibition. So Cameron dealt with one prohibited unfair commercial practice already. Another is to omit material information from an invitation to purchase. And there are three key concepts within that. The first is obviously omit. The second is material information. And then thirdly, an invitation to purchase. So dealing with each of those in turn, omit, well, the DMCCA makes clear that technical compliance simply isn't good enough. It's not sufficient. The material will still be considered to be omitted if provided in an unclear or untimely way, or in such a way that the consumer is unlikely to see it. So attempts at burying in the small print or providing very, very late in the process simply won't be good enough. But they do say in the Act that consideration will be given when considering a breach to any limitations arising from the means of communication. So space and time are the obvious ones, so the size of the packaging or the duration of the advert. And then any steps that have been taken by traders to overcome those limitations. So has there been a hyperlink set up? Is there a QR code? Are you directed or encouraged to visit a website? So second, invitation to purchase. Well, that's a commercial practice involving the provision of information to a consumer, which firstly indicates the characteristics of a product and its price, and secondly, which enables or purports to enable the consumer to decide whether to purchase a product or take another transactional decision in relation to the product. So classic examples will be the price of a product in a shop, items listed on an online marketplace website, a menu in a restaurant, banners in apps advertising ad-free versions or in-app purchases. And the CMA have quite helpfully confirmed in their guidance that if there's no price, it's not an invitation to purchase. And secondly, where a specific product isn't identified, it again isn't an invitation to purchase. So general advertising of a brand rather than a specific product won't be caught by the requirements. And then the final key issue is the material information. So there's a very long list in section 232 of the DMCC of what constitutes material information. And this is where we really get into the specific drip pricing considerations, because the first identified within that list is the total price of the product. And that expressly includes any fees, taxes, charges, or other payments that a consumer will necessarily incur. So genuinely optional prices don't have to be included in the total price. And then secondly, if owing to the nature of the product, the whole or any part of the total price cannot reasonably be calculated in advance, set out how the price will be calculated. The information given must allow the consumer to calculate what the total price is. And importantly, it has to be set out with as much prominence as any other information given identifying the total price. So again, a prohibition on small print, and that provision potentially create some quite difficulties on how explanations are provided. The CMA guidance contains quite a useful flowchart on how you would work out what the total price is. And it's worth just looking at that briefly. So the first question is, will the consumer necessarily incur the payment of this charge if they purchase the product? And if the answer is no, well, that charge doesn't need to be included within the total price. But it may still need to be supplied in order to avoid making a material omission. So fall within the material emissions provisions in section 227 of the DMCCA. So you're not out of the woods yet, but that of course probably is outside the scope of the talk. If the answer is yes, so they will necessarily incur the payment of the charge, it's mandatory. You go on to ask, does the nature of the product mean the charge cannot reasonably be calculated in advance? And if no, well, the charge needs to be included in the total price. And if yes, then the information must be provided about how it's to be calculated. The CMA have also provided in their guidance some examples of what are lawfully provided mandatory charges, what optional charges are, and what prohibited drip pricing is. The examples are exceptionally clear-cut and are very, very unlikely to be contentious. Just by way of example, their example of lawfully provided mandatory charge, one of them is total price of a second-hand car is displayed as £200. That includes an admin fee and cost of balloting the car, as those two additional fees aren't optional. Their example, an example of providing optional charges is the total price of the TV is displayed as £350, but that doesn't include the extended warranty, as that is genuinely optional. And then on prohibited drip pricing, one of their examples, which lots of people will be familiar with, a hotel advertises £100 per room per night on a website. Consumer inputs their dates for a 2-night weekend stay. They're provided with a total price of £200. They click through all of the optional extras. They don't want to upgrade the room. They don't want flowers and wine in their room. They don't add any of those things. They complete their choices, and then they're informed that there's a £25 per night weekend surcharge. So a total price of £250. And that is an example, the CMA say, of a very clear-cut prohibited drip pricing practice. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll have noticed that there's not been any mention of transactional decisions. Now, section 225, subsection 4A, which applies to misleading actions, omissions, aggressive practices and contraventions of professional diligence, requires as a prerequisite that the commercial practice, and I quote, is likely to cause the average consumer to take a transactional decision that the consumer would not have taken otherwise as a result of the practice. And you'll recall in relation to the previous CPRIT provisions, there was also express mention of transactional decisions. But this prerequisite doesn't apply to invitations to purchase, so the drip pricing provisions. So that means that the omission of the total price is an unfair commercial practice, regardless of whether it is likely to impact a consumer's transactional decision. So that removal of the additional prerequisite demonstrates just how important it is to get the total price right. So when can we expect enforcement? Well, as I said, the provisions fully came into force earlier in April, with the final CMA guidance just 2 days before they came into force. But on the 10th of March of this year, Sarah Cardell, the CMA's chief executive, gave a speech in which she made some quite interesting comments about drip pricing. And what she said was, this was where we received the most substantive feedback to our consultation. We want to reflect carefully on that feedback before finalising our position. So I'm announcing today that we will take a phased approach to the guidance here. In April, we will provide a clear framework for complying with the parts of the law which are already well understood and largely unchanged. By this, I mean the prohibition on genuinely unexpected and untrialled mandatory charges added on at the end of the purchasing journey. These dripped fees harm consumers and fair dealing businesses by hindering effective price competition, which we know primarily happens on headline prices. But she went on to say, for those aspects of the DRIP pricing guidance that have created more uncertainty, including fixed-term periodic contracts, we will run a further consultation on revised draft guidance in the summer, with a view to producing finalised guidance in this area in the autumn. And she said, in the meantime, we will only take enforcement action against DRIP pricing, which clearly breaches the rules in line with the April guidance. So that speech perhaps explains why the final CMA guidance on DRIP pricing is significantly scaled back from the initial draft that was consulted on. That draft had much more detail on how to present total price in different situations, so for fixed-term contracts or unit-based pricing. And her speech is then reflected both in the CMA's responses to the consultation and also the DRIP pricing section in the finalised guidance. And there it's confirmed that the CMA will update this section as soon as possible to include further details on other areas raised during the consultation, including fixed-term periodic contracts charges. So whilst DRIP pricing enforcement can now be expected, the CMA will not seek to enforce the most complex aspects of the rules pending the further consultation. So the takeaway, if your non-compliance is as clear-cut as the examples that are provided by the CMA in their guidance, you can expect enforcement. If not, then you've got a little more time to work things out. So where are the key issues on which clarity is still outstanding? Well, it seems to me that there are probably two ones that have been flagged and highlighted by the responses to the CMA's consultation on the initial version of the guidance. So the first is, well, how do you go about calculating the total price where you're not in one of those very clear-cut situations? And then secondly, what is it about the nature of the product that means the total price cannot reasonably be calculated in advance? The concerns are numerous and they do tend to be quite sector specific. I think are best demonstrated by a few examples. So first, and one that's very much at the forefront of the CMA's mind, is how do you deal with fixed term contracts? Is it the total monthly price? Is that sufficient? Or is the price to be calculated over the full term? Delivery charges. How do you deal with free delivery on orders above a certain value, or basket-based charges, or transaction fees that vary by method of payment? How do you display a joining fee on contracts at a gym? What about mid-contract price increases? What about refundable damage deposits and pre-authorised holds placed on consumers' cards? Is a fully refundable charge exempt from the pricing requirements if they're fully disclosed in the booking process? And then finally, you've got a whole other sector of property transactions. How do you reflect taxes, service charges, stamp duty, ground rent, and all of those other fees that come with a property purchase? So there's a significant lack of clarity surrounding those issues at the minute. Which of course is particularly concerning, given you've got a standalone criminal offence to omit material information from an invitation to purchase, and of course also the CMA's direct enforcement powers. So it's very much hoped that the autumn guidance will provide some clarity on those issues, and if it does, no doubt we'll be back to tell you all about them. But of course, a potential issue is that the CMA are unlikely to either think of or be able to or want to provide guidance on every pricing permeation when they're providing their supplemental guidance. So it's likely that that issue of how you calculate price and whether you fall within the exemption of disclosing the total price will continue to be an issue that businesses need to grapple with in the future. And with that, I'll hand back to Cameron.
Yeah, a couple of things that I took from there. Firstly, the cost of a second-hand car, as far as the CMA is concerned, £200 left me gobsmacked. And really, this, because of the spectrum and the number of ways pricing can be calculated, the key word is transparency, isn't it? Yeah. It's all about transparency. If you're transparent about it, then hopefully you don't fall foul of the legislation. And I liked how the Department for Business and Trade referred to DRIP pricing before the DMCC came in, which was as sneaky hidden fees. And really, the legislation was aimed to ban low base prices being put forward as headline prices, but they were headline prices that could never be obtained due to add-ons and added pricing. So that's really what it was getting at. But following consultation, it's quite clear that there are a lot of different ways of approaching pricing. But the key, in my view, is clarity and transparency. So with that, I'm going to look in the chat, and I'm very grateful to see that there are no questions. Because we've run out of time, and so I was going to simply refer you all to our various emails to get in touch with us if you've got any questions. Of course, feel free to do that if you're thinking about what's been discussed and ably presented, at least by Sabrina, then do get in touch with us and we'll do our best to try and answer any questions you have. But for now, good. Someone just pops up in the chat, but thankfully it was just saying thank you, very helpful. So with that, we wish you well and look forward to seeing you on the next Gough Square Live, which I believe is also going to be live and is due to be next month.
Some undisclosed time.
Yeah.
To be sent around, I'm sure.
I imagine you'll get an email from Chambers inviting you to it and telling you what it will all be about. And the chat's now pinging lots with thank yous. Thanks, everyone. Take care.